Welcome to Hope Under Fire. So in the last video I did, we talked about whether or not Christians ought to debate. And basically, as a recap, I think that debate amongst Christians can be a good thing if a couple criteria are met. Number one, the interaction has to be done with love, grace, and mutual respect. You know, all the parties involved need to be as charitable to one another as possible and respecting one another as individuals, as brothers and sisters in Christ, and for people for whom Christ died. Number two, the focus needs to be on truth and unity, and also in building each other up. So the focus of the conversation is not to necessarily, beat your opponent or something like that, but it's to meet bad doctrine or bad theology with good theology, and with the intention of, we need to find the truth. We have A and B, and we need to find out which one's right. So truth, unity, and edifying each other. And to make the debate a good thing, I think it also needs to be about essential doctrines or theology. It needs to be something that has a little meat to it. That's not to say that you can't talk about politics or history or anything like that, and you should. Even debate those things is fine. But to be like a good, edifying thing, I think it needs to have a weighty subject. In this video, I wanted to take a look at I don't want this to be a reaction video. Rather, I want this to be a reflection video. We're reflecting on what has happened with this interchange between Bryan Ross and a couple members of the Textual Confidence Collective. So I'm going to give a little bit of background first into this, because there's probably 30 hours or so worth of video that you would have to watch to get the whole context of what's going on. So for most of you, you're probably going to not watch that whole 30 hours. So I'm going to give you kind of the time frame of how these things are going down as far as the videos, and then go back and kind of analyze them a little bit. So just a little background. I was not familiar with the gentleman in the TCC or the Textual Confidence Collective until Bryan introduced me to him. So this would be last year, July, I believe, is when they started, July 2022. They started a series of videos, 4 gentlemen, and I don't remember all 4 of their names. I know it's Tim Berg, Mark Ward, and 2 other gentlemen I can't remember, but they did a video series, and it ended up being 7 videos long. So when they came out with, I think, the first or second video, Bryan sent me a link and said, hey, check this out, let me know your thoughts. And Bryan will typically do that. He'll send me links to things he thinks I'll find interesting, and just say, hey, watch this and tell me what you think. He gives me no context. He doesn't preface it at all. He just gives me the link and says, watch it whenever you can, get back to me. And I think the reason is because he doesn't want me to go into those videos with any preconceived notions. So I had no idea who these guys were. Watched the TCC videos. Then Bryan and I started corresponding back and forth, talking about it, and Bryan was talking to several other people at the same time. Bryan ended up coming out with a video list, thoughts on the TCC, which was 17 videos long, basically looking at what the TCC videos had laid out, their arguments, their ideas, their concepts, and kind of said what he liked about it, what he didn't like about it, what he agreed with, what he disagreed with, and then he put out his point of view. So we had point A, or view A, TCC's view, and then we had Bryan's view. Then just this past July, so on July 20th, 2023, Bryan sent me a link. Nothing else, just a hyperlink to a YouTube video, which was for Mark Ward and Timothy Berg. Had a video entitled Analyzing Some of KJV Defender Bryan Work, Evaluating Some of the Work of KJV Defender Bryan Ross. So that's all he sent me, a hyperlink of it, and left it at that. And then Bryan decided to respond to that video. Ended up doing 5 videos in response, which he just released this past week in September. So that's kind of the timeline. There was the TCC videos last year, July 2022. They put out 7 videos, putting out view number A. or view number A. Stupid. View A. And then Bryan came back and had his thoughts on their point of view, 17 videos with view B, and a critique of view A. And they were good. I liked the TCC videos. I liked Bryan's response videos. Very insightful. Then the analysis came about 1 year later. So TCC, 1 year later, they put out the analysis of Bryan. And then Bryan in September puts out his response to their analysis. So that's just kind of the timeline, the general idea of what is happening. So we have view A, view B, analysis of Bryan's work, response to the analysis. So you understand there's this back and forth now going. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about my familiarity and lack of familiarity with the participants in this. So when it comes to Bryan, I'm very familiar with Bryan's work. So these are all books and booklets that I have by Bryan. These are all either authored or co-authored by Bryan. I've read all of them. Some of them I read before they went into print because Bryan would send them to me to proofread. I also have Gospel Project by Bryan and Dave Reed, The Day of the Lord Project by Bryan and Dave Reed, The Protestant Revolution Project by Bryan, Dave Reed and Jeff Newnham. Then I also have these right here are all notes from his Sunday school classes that I attended. So I'm very familiar with Bryan's work. I'm a good, I consider Bryan to be a good friend of mine. On the other side, I'm very unfamiliar. I do not have much familiarity with the four gentlemen in the TCC. When Bryan sent me the original leak last July, that was the first time I had heard of any of those guys. So at that point, I did not like them. I did not dislike them. I didn't even know they existed. Bryan's the one who sent their information to me. I know Bryan very well. I know his work very well. I don't know theirs so much. So I have to keep my comments a little bit more toward Bryan since he's the one I'm familiar with. But there were some good things that came through all this. Like I said, I want to reflect on the good and the bad. When I watched the TCC videos, I thought they were good. They were thought-provoking and interesting. I enjoyed watching them. I really did. It was a different perspective than my own. I fall a lot more closely to Bryan, and so but I thought it was interesting, and I was grateful that he sent them to me. And then Bryan and I corresponded a little bit. He asked me my thoughts on it. We went back and forth. Bryan did his videos on the thoughts on the TCC where he outlined his position, and I thought those are really good. I thought he did a good job explaining his position and how it differed from theirs, some of the weaknesses in their argumentation or perceived weaknesses, things that he would have liked them strengthen up. I think he's regularly said, they need to define their terms a little bit better. They want this textual confidence group and then textual absolutist groups. And those are not very clearly defined, and I agreed with them. I feel like they were used a little bit ambiguously. It was hard to pinpoint like who would fit into which group. And so, Bryan said, I think that needs to be teased out further. And at that point, I thought, you know what? This is a good place to end it. And I thought it kind of had, because Bryan put out his stuff and now it's been a while since they've had any interaction with each other. So I thought maybe they dropped it. That's done. You have view A now out there. You have view B out there. And we're good. Everything's good. We can, as an audience, look and see, here's view A, here's view B, which one makes more sense to me, and, we're good to go. But it didn't end there. Should have, but it didn't. My opinion, it should have ended there. Then on July 20th, which is the day the evaluating some of the work of KJV defender Bryan Ross dropped, Bryan sent me the link. No description, no preface, nothing, just the link, the day that it dropped, and that's it. He didn't say, hey, watch this and get back to me, so he sent me the link, I thumbs him up. I didn't even really know what it was. I thought maybe it was a link to one of his videos. He does that all the time. So I just gave him a thumbs up. Didn't think anything of it. When I got time to go watch the video, I realized that, oh, it's, a couple guys from the collective talking about Bryan's work. And so I'll say this. When I saw the video, I did not have any negative views toward these gentlemen. That's important because, like I said, when I first, found out about them last year, July, I didn't even know they existed. So I didn't like them. I didn't dislike them. I wasn't familiar with their work. He sent me this link, and my initial reaction was, oh, okay, cool. They're maybe evaluating the response that Bryan put out to the TCC, and we're going to get to see this interplay. So I actually had positive thoughts going into watching that video. I thought, oh, cool, I get to see their rebuttal now. And, I was curious. I was genuinely curious about what they were going to say. I thought it was a good thing. And I figured Bryan sent it to me because I'm sure Bryan was going to offer his rebuttal and there was going to be this interplay and exchange of ideas. And like I said in my last video, I value that. I think that Western civilization is largely built on that concept of free exchange of ideas. The Great Conversation, which is, the first book in the great books of the Western world, is basically saying that, yes, starting with the Greeks, all throughout the Western civilization history, there is this ongoing conversation, and that's what makes the West so great, is because every art and science has a seat at the table to discuss. Everyone can bring their view and opinion and check it against, the rest of the conversation to see where it is. So I love that interchange. I was not angry at these gentlemen for responding to Bryan. I thought this is good. This could be helpful for me as someone who's seeking a graduate degree in these things. I'm like, this is good. I need to see this sort of stuff. I need to see guys who have done the hard work interacting with each other and producing content that helps me sift through these different opposing views. So I was excited to watch this video. At the beginning of the video, they give Bryan a whole bunch of praises. And I agree. The praises were, they were spot on. Bryan, is a great historian. He's very thorough. He does his homework. I always say Bryan brings his receipts. He doesn't say things unless he backs them up with scripture, with primary source documents, like all of his stuff that I've been a part of or seen. He brings his receipts every time. He doesn't just make claims without substantiating them. And I think if you've met Bryan, you know that. The problem was, I entered that video with great expectation. It took me about 30 seconds to go, oh no, this is not going to be good. I texted Bryan. I'm not going to read Bryan's text for his, respect his privacy, but I'll read mine. As I was watching it, I said, totally weird, off-the-wall observation, but near the beginning of the video, especially when they are praising you, which I said, I agree, their praises were good, and they were accurate. I said, it's a weird observation. Now, I will say this. I've worked in self-defense and trained in self-defense since I was 17. I started training in Israeli Krav Maga. I trained under a Force Recon and CIA field op, long range reconnaissance and undercover guy. Through the years, I started when I was 17 and now I'm 34 this year, I think. I've picked up a thing or two about reading body language, reading eyes, profiling people. I'm not saying I'm an expert, but you're around it enough, you start to pick up things. I watched a lot of stuff on profiling, and I've worked in the self-defense industry now as a instructor for several years now. I've watched a lot of stuff on this. I watch people. I people watch quite a bit. And so while I was watching these two gentlemen, you can watch them both on the screen together, their body language were exactly opposite. One of them had his face up, his tone was higher and would heighten. The muscles around his eyes and mouth would flex. Anytime something negative was said about Bryan, all that stuff would light up. It was almost as if he was getting a shot of dopamine or adrenaline whenever he would say something negative to Bryan. Now, I'm not trying to assign motives. I'm just saying what I saw or thought I saw. The other individual, juxtaposed, every time something negative was said about Bryan, his shoulders would slump forward, he would look down at the table, his eyes would become sad, his mouth would droop. Even when he smiled, it was a very, like, somber look. They were very, I think the contrast between the two was, it freaked me out a little bit. So that's why I say, near the beginning, their eyes and body language are really off. Could just be that they're nervous to do the video, or that, or that they don't like you. Like, I don't know why, but something's not right. Yeah, and I could tell it from their body language right at the beginning of the video. I'm like, something is not right. And so now sirens are going off, red flags are going off, and I'm like, this video is not about ideas anymore. It's no longer about, you know, who is idea right, or is idea A correct or idea B correct. This is like, something else is going on here. I'm freaking out. I have warning bells and sirens going off everywhere. These guys are not here to discuss ideas. That's not their primary reason for doing this video. So I texted Bryan back a little bit later and I said, I listened to about half. I'm going to have to watch again and pay more attention, but it doesn't seem like they fairly represented your position. It seems very strawman-ish. I don't know if that's a word or not. As I watched the video, like I said, I'm very familiar with Bryan's work. I'm very familiar with Bryan's point of view. Bryan has been instrumental in shaping my own point of view. So as I'm listening and watching this video of theirs, I'm realizing that everything they're saying doesn't make any sense. Like, I know that's not Bryan's point of view. I know it 100%. I would put so much money on it. In debate 101, a cardinal sin of debate is that you do not, for any reason, knowingly or unknowingly, misrepresent your opponent's point of view. That is a cardinal sin of debate. And as I watched it, I realized that, wow, this is not Bryan's point of view at all. Like, and it was so bad, and again, I don't want to assign motives, but it was so bad that I thought they must be doing it on purpose. There's no way they could have accidentally got his view that wrong. So it either has to be on purpose, or they don't really know what his view is because they haven't actually done their homework. Either way, those aren't good. If they misunderstood, I would assume that they would reach out to Bryan and say, hey, have we got it right? And if Bryan said, I don't think you got my view right, and they really cared about getting his view right, they wouldn't have published the video. That's my opinion. You know, I don't know what went down behind the scenes, but how I think about things, if they really cared about fairly representing Bryan and Bryan's position, they would have sent it to him. If he said, hey, there's some stuff in here that's not right, they never would have posted the video without fixing it. They posted the video. So my assumption is, this is assumption, my assumption is they weren't really they didn't really care to get Bryan's point of view right. Now that's just my own private interpretation as an outside observer looking in. I don't think they really cared to get Bryan's point of view right. I think they said, this is what I think Bryan's view is, and that's what we're going to run with, and they just put it out there anyway. It's my view. It may be wrong. I don't want to be uncharitable about that, but that's just how I see it. It may be completely wrong. If that was all the problem I had with the video, whatever. Okay, they messed up his point of view. It's a cardinal sin in debate, but whatever. that's an easy fix. Just like, oh, sorry guys, you got it wrong. Here's what I actually believe. And so when Bryan asked me about that and whether he should respond, that's definitely something I said, yeah, you probably should at least get your view out there and say, look, they misrepresented my view. This is my view. You know, you got to respond to that, I think, at a minimum. The other thing, though, they did is that they attacked Bryan's character and integrity, as well as said some things that, if I'm being honest, made me very angry. And I come from a blue-collar family. I grew up working blue-collar. I still work blue-collar, construction trade jobs. And in my world, if you said things like that to another guy, there's a good chance you're going to catch hands. Like, you don't disrespect somebody like that and think there's not going to be a consequence. My initial reaction was I got angry. I could feel my ears and neck turning red and the blood rushing to it, because I was like, how do they dare to say that kind of stuff? Like, I mean, how do you dare to straight up call someone a coward in front of everybody? You know, how do you dare to call them basically disingenuous and say that he was sloppy and basically a scab because of the work he put out? I mean, I don't understand it. In the context, if you're not going to watch it, what was said was, the context was this. It was insinuated that Bryan only teaches what he teaches because he's basically pandering to his base. He's preaching to the choir, and the King James people pull his puppet strings and make him dance. And that's the only reason he believes what he believes, or teaches what he teaches. You know, basically insinuating he has no real integrity or intellectual honesty in putting out this material. They insinuated that Bryan wasn't teaching it because it was true, or at a minimum because Bryan thought it was true. They were saying Bryan only is teaching this because he's pandering to the King James people. And the quote, or I'm not going to quote it, the paraphrase, was, Bryan needs to grow a backbone and basically go against the King James people who are basically telling him what he's allowed to say. And at that point I was like, oh no, you can't say things like that. You just straight up called him a coward and a disingenuous individual who's being puppeted by the King James people. Now, I know Bryan. I know his view. And I know for a fact, I know personally have met King James people who have preached in his church at conferences who will not talk to him anymore because he's not King James enough in his position. I personally have met them. I've shook their hand. I know for a fact that that's garbage, that Bryan panders to the King James. That's garbage. I know that for a fact. And to watch somebody call my friend a coward and disingenuous when it's stuff that I know for a 100% fact is garbage, that's hard to take. And so that's where this exchange left debate and turned into a strife about words and striving with one another, because these guys decided that rather than take Bryan's point of view and say, okay, we disagree with view B. We already put out our view A. He put out view B. Okay, let's look at Bryan's view and let's assess the argumentation. Let's assess that. That would be fine. That's great. I was expecting that. That's what I was looking forward to. That's what I had hoped for. I had no expectation going into it that it would turn into not an analysis of Bryan's work, but an analysis of Bryan as a person. I expected more. When you watch individuals who have graduate degrees interact with each other, who are supposed to be brothers in Christ, who have graduate degrees interacting, you have expectations. I expect the debate to be about position A versus position B. and supporting evidence, critique of, and back and forth rebuttal that is respectful, that is aimed at unity, that is aimed at truth. I didn't see that. Their analysis of Bryan video was, it left a lot to be desired as far as argumentation was. There was a lot of informal fallacies committed. I counted at least, there was appeal to authority used, there was ad hominems used, there were poisoning the well, there was a lot of straw manning and misrepresentation of Bryan's work. It was rough. It was really rough to watch, and it was sad. And I was very disappointed. And I think Bryan, in response, did a good job of responding to what needed to respond to. He said, look, you misrepresented my point of view, here, and here. Here's what I actually believe. Here's all the receipts. Here's all, and then the other thing he had to respond to, and what I said to you, we should call the bad behavior out, because I believe these two brothers behaved very poorly toward Bryan. And, call it out and say, look, you called me a coward. You said I was disingenuous. All these things about me. You attacked my character. This is supposed to be about idea A versus idea B, and now you're going after me in these ad hominem attacks. And we can't have that. As the body of Christ, that's the sort of debate we can't have. We can't have Christians going after each other's throat. We cannot bite and devour one another. And so I think kudos to Bryan for coming back and keeping it about the main thing. Look, here's what you said about my views. That was dead wrong. You misrepresented me. Here's what I actually believe. Here's the receipts. You said a whole bunch of mean, hurtful things about me, insinuated or directly. That's not acceptable. I don't accept that. You guys need to apologize. And I think that going forward, they did post Bryan's stuff on their site and said that they will not be responding, which I think is a good plan. I think it's a good place to do that. But I do think that these brothers owe him a public apology. You publicly called him a coward. You publicly insinuated that he had no integrity intellectually, that he was being puppeteered by the very people who are basically disowning him at this point. I think you owe him an apology, at the very least. And then I would say, yes, wash our hands of this, let's walk away, because this has gone beyond what is able to be edifying to the church. But for those of you who aren't going to watch all that stuff, that's my synopsis. Again, this is all just my take on it, my opinion on it. If you disagree with me, that's fine. I'm not going to lose sleep over it, but I love Bryan dearly. I hate to see him mistreated like this. I'm very passionate about that, and I hope my passion hasn't turned into something that harms the church. But until next time, I love y'all, and I'm praying for you. See you later.